The Bear is a new FX series that premiered in 2022. You can stream all episodes of the first season on Hulu, and this is the official synopsis. A young chef from the fine dining world returns to Chicago to run his family's sandwich shop. That synopsis definitely doesn't do it justice, but I guess gives you an okay idea of what the show is about. It's also listed online as a comedy drama. I think within Hulu itself, which is where I watched it, it's listed as a comedy, which I definitely do not see the series as. The comedy drama genre, I think, is a bit more fitting because it does have some funny parts, but I definitely see this series more through the lens of it being a dramatic show. Now, let me give a quick shout out to each of the writers, because again, if we don't shout out the writers here on the Spun Today podcast, who will? Starting with Karen Joseph Adcock, Sophia Levitsky Weiss, Alexander O'Keefe, Christopher Storer, which is also the creator, by the way, Joanna Callow, Renee Gube, and Catherine Shettina. Let's hear a round of applause for each and every one of those great writers that put together an amazing first season of The Bear, because the writing in the series absolutely really does stand out. And what stands out even more for me in this series in particular is the acting. I think every single person in this series I had never seen in anything else, and each and every one of them, of all the main characters, gave amazing performances, like super believable. I was very invested in multiple of the characters. I cared about what they cared about, and that's ultimately a testament to great writing and amazing acting that's able to deliver what's on the page. Oh, and I'm lying, by the way, Maddie Matheson is in this. He's more of like a side-ish kind of character. It was definitely cool to see in this. Now, like I said before, the synopsis doesn't really do it justice. You have the main character, Carmen, aka Carmy, played by Jeremy Allen White, who is this superstar, fine dining chef phenom character, as you learn throughout the series, working at all the top-end restaurants all around the world, on the cover of all the fine dining magazines as the youngest chef to ever achieve everything that he achieved within that world, etc. And he returns home to Chicago. Shout out to Chicago, by the way. This is like the Chicago episode after speaking about John Hughes and now this. But he returns home to run this hole-in-the-wall family restaurant that was passed down from his father to his older brother, who we know has passed away, but I'm not going to spoil for you all how. There's some like depth and mystery around that, and we learned that probably mid-season. And it's a short season, by the way, only 8 episodes. And we see him returning home and dealing with the juxtaposition of this fine dining world that he's coming from into this hole-in-the-wall, mainly sandwich shop restaurant that now he's largely taken upon himself to fix and turn around and make into something. And later on in the series, we also find out why. Meaning why he's even taking this on, as opposed to just like selling it, cutting his family's losses and moving on with his life. And in that restaurant setting is where we get to know all these rich characters that work within the restaurant and used to work obviously with his brother, some even with his dad. Carmy himself plays an amazing character. Very close second in the series, I would say, is Richard, aka Richie, aka Cousin. They call each other cousin, even though they're not really cousins. Richie was his brother's best friend, but they all like grew up together. And Richie was pretty much running the show and was his brother's right hand in the restaurant and in life, his best friend, etc. But his character, he just does a fantastic job. And I just wanted to share a couple moments throughout the series that resonated with me, as I usually do. But absolutely recommend you guys watching the series in its entirety. And I'm lying, by the way, of not knowing any of the actors within the series. 2 more are John Bernthal, of course, who played Michael, which is the brother that died. He is in some like flashback scenes. And we have Uncle Jimmy, played by Oliver Platt, which also does an amazing job. And he plays like this pseudo mafioso type of character, and surprisingly plays a really good wise guy, in my opinion. But ultimately, we find out that Uncle Jimmy lent Michael about $300,000. And now, aside from Carmi having to turn this business around and turn it into something, he has to pay back his brother's debt to his uncle, which his uncle is not really strong on arming him. He even gave him an out. He was like, listen, why don't you just sell me the place and we call it even, and I'll, flip it, turn it into something else, something that's not a restaurant. But Carmi's insistent in turning the restaurant around and tells his uncle no, that, he'll take on the debt and he'll pay him back everything. And in a scene between them two, between Uncle Jimmy and Carmi, speaking about this $300,000 hole that he's in, Uncle Jimmy delivers a line that I thought was pretty dope, which is, you can't start from fucked. That was definitely a good line there. Another line in a different scene, different episode from Uncle Jimmy, was him speaking to Carm about his brother, Uncle Jimmy's brother, which is Carm's father, the one that originally had the restaurant. He told him they were speaking about like them growing up as kids, and Uncle Jimmy told him that he was like, we were close in age, so we were more like friends than family, We had the same kind of problems around the same time, so we had a lot to talk about. And I thought that was pretty dope and an interesting takeaway for me in terms of relationships and how true that is, like that aspect of having the same kind of problems around the same time. When you share that type of experience with someone, you have that more kind of like friendship-based relationship, whether they're a sibling or a friend, as opposed to having the same kind of problems at different times, where then a sibling or a father figure or an older friend becomes more of like a mentor in your life, where they can tell you, hey, this is what I went through in such and such situation that you may be going through now, and impart like words of wisdom kind of. But it's a completely different type of relationship and dynamic when you are going through the same kinds of problems around the same time. Definitely gives you much more to speak about because you're openly vulnerable about certain situations because you're both trying to figure shit out. I just never heard that put that way, so I thought that was interesting. There was a great scene between Carmi and Richie when they're like in the back of the restaurant smoking a cigarette, just like exhausted from the day. And Carmi asks him, he goes, is there a name for the thing where you're afraid for something to go good or something good happening because you think something bad is going to happen right after it? And then Richie replies, I don't know, life? And I thought that was a dope, cynical take. The dialogue in the series is great. I think that's what I gravitate most towards as usual. Then there's a scene between Natalie, aka Sugar, played by Abby Elliott, which is Carmi's sister, and they're in the office of the restaurant digging around for some paperwork that their deceased brother like misfiled, and now the IRS is coming after the sister because she has a house and it was like in the family name or something like that, and they have to find this paperwork. But they have a heart-to-heart type of conversation because the sister's like, yo, you're so distant, you never reach out and you never ask me how I'm doing, I lost a brother too, it's not just you. Then Carmi, who has at his sister's advice been going to like a NA meetings, Narcotics Anonymous, putting up there and dealing with some of the feelings that he's having, he tells her this like dope piece of dialogue, which was, quote, I guess all the time I feel like I'm kind of trapped because I can't describe how I'm feeling. So to ask somebody else how they're feeling, that just seems like, I don't know, insane. But I am sorry because you're right. And I do want to know how you're feeling. And that was definitely a dope moment for their two characters. And then there's a scene towards the end of the series where Carmi, in one of these like NA meetings, gives this great monologue that explains why he feels he's back and really trying to make this restaurant work, etc. Really touching, amazing acting. And it was interesting how his brother pushed him away when he was younger and didn't like want him to go to the restaurant, and him going into cooking and being a chef was kind of like a fuck you to his brother. And he felt that the better he got at that, the deeper he got into his craft, the more strained his relationship with his brother got. So the better he would get in one, the worse it would be with the other. And then him being back home and trying to turn the restaurant around and trying to fix the restaurant was symbolic of him trying to fix that strain that always existed between him and his brother. And that was a dope correlation that I honestly didn't really put together until he actually delivered that monologue during that meeting. But definitely check it out, folks. It's a great show. Very short number of episodes, only 8 episodes. It's called The Bear, and it's streaming now on Hulu.